Welcome to the Discover Health podcast, where we explore the power of gut health, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you feel your best every day. I'm Dr. Josh Sharp, your guide on this journey to better digestion, more energy, and overall well-being. Each week, we'll dive into expert insights, practical tips, and real-life strategies to help you discover health. Ready to start discovering? Let's hit the trail. Welcome back to another episode of Discover Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Sharp, and joining me today is Andi Hembroff. And she has been forced to become an expert in mold remediation, and mold testing because of her own story and her own struggles. And now that she's on the other side of that, she has such an amazing story to tell. And I think it's going to be really beneficial for anyone that is experiencing some unexplained symptoms to hear her story and what she's been through. But thank you so much for joining me today, Andi.
Thanks for having me, Joshua. Really happy to be here.
Can you walk me through your journey with, first of all, Lyme disease, but also with mold illness? What were some of the early signs? What were some of the moments, or what were some of the things that kind of told you something was really wrong?
Got it. Well, my journey starts when I purchased my first home in 2017. Ironically, we purchased our first home because my 2-year-old daughter contracted lead poisoning from our rental home. And we caught it right away, luckily. And we weren't ready to buy a house. We're kind of saving our pennies, but we qualified for just enough. And we found a modest house. My mom's been a realtor for 50 years, so she helped us with that process. We got the home inspected, did the pre-purchase inspection, and it was a modest house, but it looked pretty clean. We moved in October of 2017. 2 months after being in the home, our dog died. She was 5. She developed a really sudden neurological disorder. Pretty quickly after moving into the house, my health started to change, but it was so minutely. And also, I just had my third baby. I think my son was 9 months old when we moved into the home. And so I attributed everything to, well, we just got through this move, and gosh, I'm a mom of 3 now. But it started off as ringing in my ears that was intermittent, and then it got worse and worse. Vertigo, just dizziness, migraines. And migraines, I've only ever had migraines when I was pregnant. And so I thought, well, maybe this is postpartum. And then anxiety that absolutely was not typical for me. And I'm not just talking, gosh, I'm anxious about speaking in front of people. It was, I couldn't go to the grocery store. And there was situations where I would come home from the grocery store and I'd get out of the truck and I'd be hysterical, and my husband would be like, where are the groceries? I'd be like, oh, I couldn't do it. And it would feel like the world was going to blow up. And other situations, during the pandemic, I was homeschooling, and I would call my husband, and he was a chef. He was working really long hours. And I would say, I think you need to come home. I'm having a heart attack. I think I need to go to the hospital. And it wasn't. These were anxiety attacks. And I'm not a fan of pharmaceuticals, not a fan of going to the doctor, but it was so bad. I went to my doctor and I said, this is not typical for me. I've got this anxiety. I'm having these migraines, and I couldn't control the migraines. And then I was also confused. I was really confused. I'd walk out of the store. I couldn't find the truck. I would think it was stolen. So finally, I think in end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I was diagnosed with Lyme and co-infections. And that made sense. Doc thinks I had it for a long time, so it was neurological. So I underwent an herbal protocol, and we treated that for a year. I followed it to a T and never improved. And by the time we realized that maybe mold was part of the picture, we were tapped out. I was in all these Lyme Facebook groups, and, learning and following along. And this woman reached out to me, and she said, you're not healing from Lyme because you're living in mold. And I said, oh, thanks. Nice to meet you. But no, I'm not. My house is super clean. I'm the daughter of a realtor. I keep a really clean house. No, I'm not. Well, she was really persistent, and she's a dear friend now. But one of the last times she messaged me, I was out of state for my best friend's wedding, and I came home, and I was so excited to see my husband and kids. And within 10 minutes of being in the house, I knew that it was environmental. I came home and I felt agitated 10 minutes after being in the house. And I know that sounds strange, but I get fuzzy and cloudy and just sound
Hmm.
sensitive, light sensitive. And I had
Yeah.
missed my kids. And you know how you miss your kids and they can do no wrong? It was like that. And here I'm like showing them seashells that I found and hugging them. And all of a sudden I just got really agitated. And I looked at my husband and I said, it's the house. So unfortunately, by this time we were tapped out. Absolutely tapped out. I didn't work for 2 years because I was so sick. So I hadn't been
Hmm.
working. Um, and so it was a pretty scary place to be like, oh, we just spent all this money chasing this culprit when this is the issue. So at my worst, I had dementia-like symptoms. Couldn't recall my kids' names. I would not remember the night before. Um, I couldn't find my words a lot, and that's not typical of me. Anxiety that was just unchecked, dizziness, ringing in my ears. Um, the kids had eczema, all three of them. And I thought, well, okay, it's hereditary, just weird skin issues. Um, Oh gosh, and inflammation that just it didn't really seem to make any sense. Like one day my elbow or my shoulder would be so bad I couldn't do anything, and then the next day it would be fine, and it was in my knee. And again, these are not like, oh, my knee hurts. I mean, these were things that put me
Yeah.
down, and they just kind of moved around, and so it just didn't really make any sense. And then I also developed food sensitivities, big time. I mean, and that was inconsistent. I'd eat one thing and I'd be okay, and then I'd eat it another time and just be not okay. So, um, and then my kidneys were really struggling. A lot of kidney pains that would put me on the ground, and it was a pretty scary place to be. So,
So obviously you're dealing with a lot of health
yes.
symptoms, a lot of flags are showing up. But one of the scary things is, because of the way that it was affecting your brain, it's probably really difficult to kind of put those pieces together, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was part of me was being an observer of my thoughts, and there was times
Yeah.
I felt stuck in my head. And I remember explaining it to somebody that it felt like my head was a TV screen, those old school ones with the antennas and all the
Mhm.
static. And so it was kind of like it was like thinking underwater, or like in a dream where you're running underwater. That's what it felt like, but I was very aware. And so I think that was the scariest part, is like I felt like I was a prisoner in my mind. Um, and I didn't say these, I don't think anybody realized how sick I was, because I wouldn't go, oh, hey, I forgot that's my son. I thought that was my baby brother. Or, hey, I totally spaced my kids' names. Or, I didn't say those things. Once in a while, my husband would get a phone call from me. I'd be like, I'm leaving the grocery store. I got to call the police. Somebody stole the truck. Well, I forgot where I parked it. I mean, it was wild. And I would call my husband. I said, have we talked today? And he'd be like, yeah, this morning. And so it was,
Mm.
I was really scared on the inside, but I didn't, people only saw me when I was having a good day. And so a lot of people had no idea how sick I was. My husband
Yeah.
did. And I don't know if I did myself a disservice, because when it got really bad, people were like, oh, I had no idea. I had no idea how bad it was. And we did a good job of hiding that. But it's hard to tell people that you're sick when you have no idea what's going on. And also the doctors that I was seeing are like, well, you need psychiatric care. I had brain inflammation. I mean, that's what
Right.
it was. And it's like,
That's what, yeah.
if I need psychiatric care, you need to go back to medical school. Is so it got pretty bad. We were out of money. We knew only then did we figure out that it was environmental. We had a little bit of visible mold in our basement. I'm in Minnesota and we have basements here because of the tornadoes. And we started digging into it, and my husband read about, how to deal with mold properly. He's very meticulous to detail. That was a bad idea. He started remediating our basement, and he said to me at one point, he goes, I can't stop. I have to take out the whole basement. It's everywhere. It was everywhere. And not knowing any better, I came back the next day, and we didn't know it at the time, and I have no confirmation of this, but I'm pretty confident I was having seizures.
Yeah.
There was 2 days that I walked like I had cerebral palsy. Pretty
Hmm.
weird, pretty bizarre. But we we didn't do that again. But that was pretty scary. So then we had to have a company come in and like basically clean the air in the whole house, because we essentially contaminated the entire house
Hmm.
because we set containment. It wasn't good enough. We did not know to set negative air pressure. We just had no idea of
Hmm.
the beast we were fighting. So one of the first many mistakes we made. So we ended up moving out to a tent because my kidneys were showing signs that they were failing. They weren't failing, but they were showing signs that they were. We had to drop our health insurance because it was either.
Hey, friend, real quick. If you've been enjoying this episode and you're looking for high quality, professional grade supplements that you can trust, I've got something for you. Check out our curated online store at discoverhealth.gethealthy.store. We've handpicked practitioner grade supplements that can be delivered straight to your door. And to say thank you for listening, you can use the code FIRST10 to get 10% off your order. That's discoverhealth.gethealthy.store. Your health simplified.
Groceries or health insurance.
Mm.
Um, People just had no idea. It was during the pandemic, and so we didn't really have. I think a lot of people are like, you're doing what? You're living. Your wife has Lyme disease. We'll just put her on antibiotics. And you have mold in your house. Well, that's weird. Mold doesn't do that. So there wasn't, a huge outpouring of like, this is a desperate situation. And we have really good friends that lifted us up. But so we lived in a tent for 3 months, 90-degree summer. Don't recommend that with two small
Yikes.
children and two dogs. And I think that at one point my husband must have thought I was nuts, but he was like, okay. Um, and that's where I started reading for my life, because one thing I want to make really clear is that mycotoxins and mold can do really weird things to our brains and inflame them. And one thing that happens to me, and it's happened to many others that I've talked to, is it creates suicide ideation. And so not only was I suffering
Hmm.
greatly, um, but also I knew that I needed to get my kids out of this house, but we didn't have any money. And so I very quietly rewrote my life insurance policy. I tripled the coverage. And then I had a date, a date in the future. I started writing letters, and which I'm turning into a book, by the way, because I'm still here. And I said, well, Andy, if you're going to take your kid's mother away from them, you better fight. So I reached out to professionals in the industry. I reached out to a guy named Michael Pinto with Wonder Makers Environmental. Responded to my email 9 hours later. He sent me a free textbook, Fungal Contamination, which I read cover to cover. I read everything on mold remediation, indoor air quality, environmental testing, mold toxicity. I read an obscene amount of books. And I was reading for two reasons. One was because I needed to become the professional that we needed. And then I really quickly realized that the industry is unregulated. These professionals, these mold inspectors and remediators, didn't even know what a mycotoxin was, which is wild. So I saw a need. But I also was dealing with like these dementia-like symptoms, and I knew that I had to use my brain, right? You got to use it, otherwise you lose it. And so I was trying to rewire my brain. And so reading at first was really tough. But then I just started cruising through books. So we lived in the tent for 3 months. We remediated our home, a whole basement. And then we moved back in. I recovered my health enough to work again. We were moments from losing the house. You know, our mortgage company was like, come on. And I found a local company to me that did inspections and remediation. I knew my heart wanted, I knew my passion was to be in the industry. I wanted to continue to learn. I wanted to educate. So I found a company I wanted to work for local, and I chased the owner down for 3 months. I finally said to him, I said, if you don't hire me, I'm going to show up at your doorstep. So he did. He hired me, and he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. You can't, be in these houses. So he gave me a desk, and he's like, there you go. So I created my role in his job. And for the past, for 3 years, I worked as an advocate and an educator. So I would, work to educate consumers, doctors like yourself. Some of these doctors know that their clients are being exposed to mold, but they have no idea how to set them on the path of obtaining an environmental diagnosis, which is what I love to talk about. And so I worked there for 3 years, felt really good. About a year ago, my health started to decline again. And again, I played the game of, well, is this perimenopause? Am I doing too much? Because I've just been on this mission, trying to write a book, launching a consulting business, working full time, being an advocate. So I traveled. I went away again, and I went to my best friend's house that is beautiful and clean and healthy, and I feel good. And I came back home, and after spending a night in our bedroom, I said to my husband, "It's our bedroom." He doesn't doubt me anymore, so he says, "Okay." So we started sleeping in the camper. Sure enough, it was our bedroom. And the longer I stayed out of that space, the more I knew. And people ask, well, how do you know? I'd go in there, my ears would ring, I'd get dizzy, I would kind of feel foggy. And this was instant. There was no,
Nope.
ooh, maybe. So at the time I was in the industry, and I had access to more inspectors and tests than most people. That's my passion, is environmental testing. So I had so many resources that most people don't have. And I want to make that really clear. And we started the process. We had multiple inspectors through that space. They used all the tools I recommend: thermal imaging, moisture meters, particle counters. They had all the accreditations. They were very wonderful inspectors. We ran a variety of tests in that room: spore trap air sampling. We did wall cavity sampling. We did a dust test that wasn't even on the market yet. I was really excited about it. It looked so promising. Nothing showed an issue. And the inspectors are like, we're not finding anything. But the man I was working for, he knew me, and he knew I was a canary. And I said, no, boss. I said, there's something going on in here. So he had this, luckily he had access to this test called EMEA, airborne mycotoxin environmental analysis by Respirare Labs. We ran that, came back off the charts with aflatoxin, ochratoxin A, trichlothecenes. And that was reaffirming for me, because I was like, I'm not crazy. So we took out a second mortgage, because you have to understand, at this time, we knew what mold could do. And so it wasn't a second thought for us. We're so far into this house. We knew that we had to do this. And so the second mortgage with an interest rate that literally made me throw up. And we left no stone left unturned. We remediated from the outside and then the inside out. I had a theory about the exterior of the home, and I wasn't wrong. We found mold behind the siding near my bedroom window, thanks to a woodpecker. Once the siding was off, we discovered that the windows in my on that side of the house, so in my master bathroom and my bedroom, were not flashed. Super moldy. And I wish I could show you a picture. I did wall cavity samples on that wall, multiple. never picked it up. So, and then we also found a subfloor in the bathroom that was very saturated and moldy. And again, nothing picked it up. So I feel really good in that room now. And it's all put back together. So after that, I became very excited about Respirare Labs and this tool that they have. So I chased that company for a year. I wanted to continue learning, and I learned everything I could in my role with my boss, and I wanted to move on. So I chased this company down for a year, and I'm really happy to say they finally hired me. I've been with Respirare Labs since March. And I couldn't just show up at their doorstep because they're on the West Coast and I'm in Minnesota, but that's my current gig. And I feel really good in my room now. We finally got it put back together, and it feels good.
So
So
I want to
less, yeah.
go back just a little bit. One of the things I think that is amazing about your story is how far you've come. So from the severe symptoms and living in a tent because finally recognizing that being in your house was what was making you sick. I mean, those are extreme things, but for so many people, their symptoms aren't so extreme. Their symptoms aren't so severe. What would you say to somebody, or let me rephrase that. What are some of the more mild symptoms or signs that people might be dealing with mold illness that might be more easily ignored than what you were struggling with?
A really good question, and thank you. Because I talk to families all over the US and also answering my boss's phone for 40 hours a week for 3 years. And I would always ask, well, are there any health concerns in the house? And they would say no. No, but you know, my two kids have ADHD and eczema, and I have Hashimoto's, and but they didn't think those things were
Yeah,
related. And I want to
right.
make really clear too that I never had any respiratory issues. Um, and very sadly, the previous homeowner, by the way, of our home died of liver and lung cancer. And actually, if you look up aflatoxin, it will tell you that it's one of the most known potent carcinogens known to man. She died of, and of course, I have no way of knowing, but she died of those cancers. And of course, we found
Yeah,
very high levels of aflatoxin in my room. So I think most people just have no idea. But toxic illnesses, you're not going to know right away. It's
right.
it's it's like boiling a frog. So it can look like hyperactivity in kids, eczema, especially if it's all of your kids.
Yeah,
Anxiety is a really big one, really, really big one, especially when it's just comes when it's not typical for you, migraines. But I always tell people, if you, and I don't care who you are or what kind of house you buy or rent, pay attention to your health, your mental health, your everything. Take inventory when you buy a home, when you move into a new environment. Folks that send their kids off to college, man, dorm rooms, they are notorious.
oh
Keep an
yeah,
eye on your kids. Maybe they're not just tired, so tired because they're cramming late at night and, living it up at parties. You really have to pay attention to those things when you move into a house. A lot of times it's the pets that are affected first, which it was in our home. And then us moms, right? Because we're in the home so much and we have more going on. Gosh, I recently listened to an interview by a builder who I'm such a fan of, and he says, "You are what you breathe," and it's like, yes, it's not
yeah.
just you are what you eat, you are what you breathe. So it can be very non-distinct, but for me, mold looks very autoimmune like. Thyroid
Yeah.
issues, hormone issues. So, but paying attention to those things after, say, a water event, or if you are changing your living situation, that's really important. Also, musty odors.
Yeah. Concerned about the air that you're breathing at home? With Respirare Labs AMIA airborne mycotoxin testing, you can finally know if you're inhaling harmful mold toxins, not just dust. Using a simple 1 hour air sample and accurate ELISA analysis with results in just 3 to 5 days, it's perfect for confirming safety after mold cleanup or spotting hidden toxins before they impact your health. Use my code DISCOVERHEALTH to save 7.5% on your at-home test kit. Visit respirarelabs.com or just click the link below this video or podcast description to order today and start breathing easier.
When you smell a musty odor, what you're smelling is an MVOC. It's a primary metabolite of mold. Mycotoxins are a secondary metabolite. Microbial volatile organic compounds, MVOCs, will off gas more readily in environments of high heat and humidity. So a lot of people will say, well, my basement smelled musty, but I put in a dehumidifier, it doesn't smell anymore. Cool, you're mitigating that odor. You're not removing that source. So really pay attention to musty odors. I tell everybody, if you go camping, if you travel and get away from your home, before you unpack your bags, you do anything, you walk through that house and you use your nose, because we become nose blind. I've timed it to like 5-10 minutes, and I'm the nose
Oh,
in
yeah.
my family. So walk around your house, use your nose, and if you smell a musty odor, you got to figure out what's going on. You know, running a dehumidifier and putting a Band-Aid on it is not a good solution. So
And sometimes those dehumidifiers with the filters in there, I mean, you've got a high moisture environment and
yeah,
the filter will grow mold on it. And then
yeah,
you're just shooting that
yes,
mold all over the room.
yes.
You know, you think you're
Well,
helping
yes,
yourself, but you could be
and
making it a lot worse.
yep, you've got to definitely have to maintain your equipment.
Yeah. And if it's in the basement, it's so easy to forget if you don't go down there very often. And
Right.
next thing you know, it's been 6, 8 months and that thing's been, down there, quote unquote, dehumidifying, but it really hasn't been cared for. And it could be making the problem even worse. So,
Also, thank you for reminding me. A lot of people will say, well, we have a really icky basement, but we don't go down there. It doesn't matter. Your basement and your crawl space are one of the most important for the health of your home, one of the most important places. It's kind of like your gut, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Because what a lot of folks don't understand is air moves. It's called the stack effect. It's air moving from areas of high pressure to low pressure. So all that air comes up. So if you do have an icky, scary basement, um, for years, all those contaminants are coming up, and then the life cycle continues. Mold spores will find new sources of moisture, and water damaged buildings don't just render mold and mycotoxins. It's a whole host of biological contaminants, gram-negative bacteria and endotoxins, and it's a party. So the best thing that you can do for your indoor air quality, where you're starting order of operations, is ensure that you have a solid, clean environment in your basement. That's so
Mhm.
important. It doesn't matter if you don't go down there. That's great, but that air is coming up, so it's important to
Absolutely.
know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
if anyone's ever worked with drywall and you've, sanded drywall, the drywall dust particle is probably hundreds, if not thousands of times bigger than, like mycotoxin particles that would be floating around in the air. And you think about
yeah,
how hard it is to contain drywall dust if you've ever finished a basement or done a little project. I mean, you
yes,
can put plastic around, whatever you want to do. That drywall
right,
dust is everywhere. It's on every surface of your house.
right, yep,
And
and
just,
and that's absolutely.
yeah.
I
So,
guess. Sorry, go
um,
ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, so you started this second remediation and those rooms are finally done. What things have changed in your health and in your life from where you were, years ago, 2019, 2017, 2018, 2019? What things have you noticed changing with your health and with your life since you've got that remediation? And what were some of the steps that you took to try to help heal your body?
So the first, and by the way, I'm giving you an edited version due to time. We've done 7 different remediations in our house, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is I've learned everything the hard way, so I try really hard to teach people not to do it that way.
Mhm.
Um, but also, you're not going to find all the mold at first. And for anybody listening to this that feels overwhelmed, I've improved with every effort we've made in our house. I have improved with every single remediation. So this last big one, I think, was number 7. And again, I know that sounds like a lot, but I'll get into how to hopefully avoid that. I don't nap anymore. I look back on my pictures. I love taking pictures of my kids, and so many of them were taken of me in bed. And I didn't
Oh,
realize that,
yeah.
I'm gonna get emotional. Um, but so many of them were from me in bed. And it's weird because I don't ever stop. I don't ever stop moving. I'm always out in the yard or I'm very active. I went from not being able to find my words to I present in front of IEPs all over the world now and talk to doctors every day. I feel like I'm sharper now than I've ever been. Um, my health is up and down, but I think I have a slew of autoimmune disorders, and I do a lot. So it's not, my health isn't perfect, but the things that I did, and I want to make clear that I'm not recommending that people don't see a doctor because that's detoxing can be very dangerous and you want to really know what you're doing is correct. But I, at the time, didn't have money to see a mold literate doctor. So I read a lot of books and did the things I could. And I really focused on being outside as much as possible. We're big fans of
Mhm.
camping, Epsom salt baths every day, dry brushing, um, juicing. Big fan of juicing. Really being cognizant of our toxic load. It's not just mold. Don't miss
Absolutely.
the forest for the trees. I got sick and my husband wasn't because my toxic bucket was full. And so I've always been very cognizant of the food I put on our table, the toxins that we're introducing in our household cleaners and things like that. Um, and brain rewiring. Brain rewiring has been a huge part of my healing as well. If your brain thinks that you're under attack, and it's stuck in a state of fight or flight, you're not going to rest, you're not going to restore, you're not going to detox. And that was very instrumental in my healing. So I feel
Absolutely.
pretty good today. So
Good.
really, really happy to be here. And I'm happy to be here. I almost wasn't. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would be grateful that you are still here. And you can count me on that list too.
Well,
So,
thank you.
in you guys learned a lot of things in a short amount of time out of necessity. And um,
Offensively.
it sounds like you learned a lot of things the hard way, which is my personal favorite way to learn things. I love to learn things the hard way, apparently, because that's what I always do. But if you had it to do over again, what would you do differently looking back with the resources that you have now, with the knowledge that you have now? What would you do differently?
I think that for anybody starting this journey that's listening, you need to know that this is your life and there is no perfect home. Yes, there are definitely homes that are not worth fixing. I've seen houses with like uh, wooden foundations, and there's definitely houses that they should just be torn down. But
Wow.
it's really important to understand that when you have a hypersensitivity in these illnesses, you're going to be hard pressed to find an environment that's perfect. So,
Hmm.
and of course, this is not a one size fits all. There will be situations where it's not worth it, but you have to be really careful of your resources as you're starting out. And the biggest mistake I see people making is they just attack it. And I get it. They make really big, expensive first moves. So, in the area of environmental testing, I see a lot of people like just spend all this money collecting data points. They'll do ERMI and they'll do another ERMI and this and that. And that's great. Data points are really important, but you need to be thoughtful of your objective, what you're going to be doing with these data points and working towards a diagnosis. So let me explain that a little bit more. When people reach out to me, because I love environmental testing, they say, Andi, I need to test my house for mold. What test should I do? And yes, I work for Respirare Labs. Yes, I love EMEA. I don't always recommend that test. And what I try to do first is obtain a really clear objective. First question I ask is, well, do you rent or do you own your home? Because somebody testing their home that they rent, the objective might be really different than somebody that owns. So if you own your home, your objective in testing it should be to meet, to answer two questions, to meet two objectives. Number one, identify sources of moisture, both past and present. And two, to determine exactly what building material is water damaged. Water is at the nucleus of all these biological contaminants. Do not miss the forest for the trees. And I think it's so easy when you're sick to just be like, mold, mold, mold. It's a symptom of moisture. So in my opinion, there's an order of operations. And because you're a doc, let me give you the best analogy I have. You go into the doctor and you say, Doc, I'm not feeling good. The doctor is never going to start out with an MRI and exploratory surgery.
Not a good one anyway.
No. They're going to take your medical history. They're going to do a physical exam. They're going to maybe do a basic blood panel. Now, I have Lyme disease and mold toxicity, and I'll tell you what, I've never gotten a diagnosis from that one. So a lot of times you'll go back and say, Andi, your panels looked great. I didn't see anything. Hey, you mentioned this. I think I'm gonna order this test, or I'm gonna send you to this specialist. So diagnosing a home is much the same. And I think that people think that because it's an inanimate object, it's so easy to diagnose. It's not. And there are going to be situations where you will not know it's there until you disassemble the wall assembly, just like in our room, right? Had I not had that one data point, and I ran a slew of tests in there because I could, and had I not had that one, we wouldn't have taken those big efforts. But also, like, what are people supposed to do? Tear their whole house down? That's not sustainable. So you have to be cognizant that there's always going to be limitations to a non-invasive inspection. There's limitations to each and every test on the market, even EMEA, even Respirare's technology. So you need to take those data points for what they are. It's a data point, and sometimes they will not reflect what's actually going on. So the appropriate place to start testing a home that you own is by hiring an inspector that knows mold and mold testing and how air moves and air quality and all of those things, obviously. But also my favorite mold inspectors are also folks that know a lot about the construction world. So folks that know the anatomy of the building envelope. They know where to look for moisture, why it's there. They know changing building codes. They know how to identify building defects. Because you find the moisture, you're going to find the biological contaminants. And they should look at the house as a whole, because air moves. And because air moves, so do contaminants. And, spore trap air sampling, people are just like, it's crap. And I agree. I've never had a spore trap air sample identify an issue that I knew was present, but it's inexpensive and it has its place.
Yeah.
And just like that blood testing, right? So in spore trap air sampling is good. It's a good tool to use as long as you and your professional know the limitations. But for those that don't know, spore trap air sampling, it will look at mold spores in the air, and mold is categorized by water activity needed to grow on building materials. So you have primary colonizers, secondary colonizers, and tertiary molds. So knowing the genera of mold spores in the air, because mold is ubiquitous, tells a story. So if you've got a spore of Stachybotrys or Chitomium, there's a story there. There's something going on. So there's always a time and a place for each and every testing methodology. And I am a fan of inspectors that say, Andi, I know you're sick. I know you're treating with a doctor. I didn't find anything here. I'm not a fan of inspectors that say there's nothing here. Well, do you have superpowers? Because I'll tell you what, the more that we've dug into our house and we bought this, oh God, what we've paid in mold remediation is almost the price we paid for this house. And my sweet, loving husband, we put our house back together, finally got back into our bedroom again after a year. And he goes, well, do you think we got it all? And I'm like, probably not. But you're not going to heal your home overnight. You're not going to heal your body overnight. So be careful how you're spending your resources. I'm not a fan of getting rid of everything. That's not financially sustainable. These folks selling these very expensive small particulate cleans, that's a solid effort for air quality. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So Had I done that service every one of our remediations, I wouldn't be here today. I don't know where I'd be. Probably,
Back in the
probably,
tent.
yeah, well, I mean, probably better than, low income housing then I would be really sick. So don't miss the forest for the trees. If you are going to invest in environmental testing, obtain a really clear objective. In other words, what question are you hoping to answer with this data point and how will it move you forward? For
Hmm.
renters, for example, why do you want to test your rental? Well, I'm having these mysterious health issues and I need to know, are they contributing to my rental? Do a
Hmm.
mycotoxin air test. Or maybe it's, I know that there's mold in this place. My landlord won't work with me. I need to get out of a lease. Cool. Let's do a swab. Let's find some Chitomium or Stachybotrys and get a data point to get you out of the lease. So
Hmm.
think before you spend.
Right. I think that's wise. So, in terms of finding a mold inspector, is there any particular things that you look for? I mean, obviously, you probably have some in your area that are good to recommend if you're in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. But what if you're other places in the country? What are what's some advice that you would give someone looking for a mold inspector?
First off, you should not be paying 10 to 15 grand for an inspection.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. And unless you're in a really, 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 really remote area, you should not be paying somebody from out of state to come look at your house. That's not, there's folks there. I like to read reviews. I like to especially read reviews for companies that work with hypersensitive people. Because if you
Hmm.
do something wrong in our house, we know it.
Yeah.
Um, I like somebody with a background in construction. They should be accredited in some capacity, either through the ACAC or Normie, something to that effect. Um, I also really love professionals that don't claim to know everything. I want somebody that is always actively learning. Science is always evolving. This industry is about to evolve, and I'm really excited about that. Really, really proud to be a part of that. Um, and just having conversations with these folks because whoever you hire to inspect or work with you in your home, your IEP, your indoor environmentalist professional, think of them as like your primary care provider. You want somebody that you can call and work with because, okay, there's limitations. I want to call and say, hey, I hired you a year ago. I've been treating with this doctor. We think I'm still being exposed. And then that professional is going to come in and be like, okay, yep, we did this last time, that last time. Let's dig deeper here. And sometimes it looks like exploratory remediation. Sometimes that looks like maybe busting out the big guns and, maybe investing in one of those more specified tests, that carry a
Yeah.
higher price tag. So, and that's another mistake people make is they'll jump from professional to professional to professional, and it's like jumping from primary care provider, and they're using the same tools with the same limitations. So find somebody that you like, that you can build a relationship with, because you will not diagnose your home overnight, and that's okay. You can still heal and move forward. But you want somebody that can get to know you, your family, and your home. So it's not a super simple answer, but be cognizant of who you hire, and don't ever hire anybody you don't trust. That's not good for
Yeah.
not good for the consumer or the professional.
Right.
So
I think so often, especially when it comes to something like that, because it is so difficult, because it's kind of an unregulated industry.
yeah,
Um, it'd be hard to search for this, but people that got into mold inspection because they have their own journey with mold, or a family member had their own journey with mold and they had to learn about it. And that's a person that's passionate about it and they understand the struggles of living in it. They understand the struggles with health that being in mold can cause. And
yeah,
that person is probably going to be the researcher. They're probably going to be the ones that are keeping up with the latest standards, because they're out there for a cause. They're out there trying to help people who've been they've been in that same situation. And so inspectors or people that you can find that have been through things like that would be really, really good to work with, I think.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's really a lot of them. And I get frustrated sometimes being in this industry because I'm not in this industry to get rich. I'm very passionate. I'm a woman of faith, and I believe this is where I was led. But I talked to some great professionals this week that just had me in tears. I'm like, I'm so grateful for you, and I like working with professionals like that.
Yeah.
They understand the emotional side of it. These are not You're not hiring somebody to give you a new kitchen. You're hiring somebody to make your home safe for your babies.
Yeah.
And there's nothing impersonal about that. So be comfortable with whoever you hire, but please understand the limitations of both your inspector and the tools that they're using. And
Yeah.
to finish up that thought, trust your gut. So me, I knew there was something going on in my room.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that my boss knew me. He understood and he listened to me. So it's
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. That's important too, because a professional with, some certification comes and says, "Oh yeah, the test is negative." Okay, that may be true, but just because you have a negative test doesn't mean that's the be all end all and that's the answer and that's the only answer. And as you found out yourself personally, you had a lot of good people who cared about you, who were trying using the best techniques that they had available to them, and it missed it. It missed
Right.
it. And so these tests, and in any test for that matter, they're not perfect. They don't catch 100% of anything. And so, you know,
Right.
I'm not saying question every test, but I would say one test does not a diagnosis make, but also
No.
one clean test or one negative test doesn't mean that your house is clear either. And so,
Right.
paying
And
attention to symptoms, that was such good advice, I think, that you gave. Switching gears just a little bit here,
go. Yeah.
I really wanted to get your just kind of a little bit of a thought process behind how has your faith and your mindset played a role in getting you to where you are now? And
Mm.
how has that changed? How has your faith changed? How has your mindset changed compared to 2017, 2018, 2019?
That's a that's a great question. I've always been a woman of faith. Um, and when I don't tell everybody this story, but you asked. So when we found our house, I had a dream the night before. I had a dream that we bought a house that was listed at this price and it was owned by a single man. And I woke up and I looked at my husband, Peter, and I said, I put an offer in on our house today. And he laughed at me. He goes, Andy, we're seeing two houses today. And we would see like a dozen in a day. And my mom, she was so patient with us. And some houses I would walk into and I'd turn right back around. And my mom would be like, you didn't even look at it. I said, it feels wrong, Mom. It feels wrong. It's going to feel right. And, my husband pulled up to this house and I got out of the truck and I don't know how to explain it other than it was an out of body experience. Honest to God. And I saw the house and I just kept saying, this is it. This is it. This is it. Even before I hit the door. And my mom is like, she's so pragmatic, she's like, you haven't even seen it yet. I'm like, this is it. I know it is. And mind you, we didn't qualify for much. So it was not a fancy house. I always felt like I was drawn to this house, to this community, and I told everybody that. And there was just one previous homeowner to this home, and everything I've gathered from her, she was a wonderful Christian woman. She was so loved, and I could feel her here. I know that sounds weird, but I would paint a wall and I'd be like, what do you think of this? Do you like this color? And I could feel her here. And when I got sick, and we realized it was the house, I was so upset with God. I was so like, why
Mm.
would you bring me here? And my faith really faltered. And of course, we know that God always has a plan and we can't always see the big picture, right? And so I found such a passion in this, and I've found my people, and there's such a need, and it's not fun being in the mold industry. I'm not getting rich quick, certainly not. But I found such a passion, and I believe that I was led here. I believe that I believe that wherever this previous homeowner went, I believe she went to heaven. And I wonder if she somehow knew that the house played, I know this sounds crazy, somehow played a role, and she never, knowing what I do about her, she would never want anybody else getting sick. And I think that I was led here because I was supposed to figure it out. And so um I know God's with me, and I spend less time worrying. Like many families like us do, dealing with these things. We worry about money. We worry about paying the mortgage every month, and feeding the kids, and God forbid retirement. I don't even know, but we know God will always provide. And so it's strengthened my faith, and with my mindset, it has made me unstoppable. I not only advocated for my family through books I read, used books, by the way. I never went back. I was pre-med. I never went back to college. And I've built a career and advocated not only for myself, but other people by used books. I'm telling you, people, read a book. It's get off of social media, read a book. And so I believe that I could go and do anything if I just put my mind to it and read a book. So it's made me stronger. It hasn't always been easy, but I'm thankful for the path that God put me on, and wish it was a little bit more exciting, and glamorous. But this is where God led me. So we're gonna do the mold thing.
Well, it's a beautiful thing, and the way that it is. And Dr. Julie Benvenuto, who I interviewed in a former podcast, she said something very profound, and I found it to be true myself. But a lot of times, the most difficult experiences that we've been through and the hardest things that we've struggled with in life create our purpose. And
Amen.
on the other
Amen.
side of that, we're supposed to use those things to bless others. It may look differently. Maybe your path or your purpose isn't to become a mold inspector or,
Oh God.
work in mold remediation, but using those difficult experiences to bless others, to help others, I think helps create our purpose. And so wherever you're at in your struggle, if you're listening to this or watching this podcast, wherever you're at in your struggle, if you're just in the middle of it, if you feel like there's the end or the light at the end of the tunnel is so far away, just recognize that there's a purpose, and don't let the suffering be for nothing. And so allow God to use you, and allow God to show you where he wants you and put you where he wants you, so that you can be a blessing to others. So
Amen.
just to wrap up things here, first of all, thank you so much for sharing and sharing all that you have. If there's one message that you could shout from the rooftop about, whether that's Lyme disease, I know that you've struggled with that, or whether that's mold, whatever the struggle has been in the different seasons of your life, what's the one message that you would want to shout from the rooftops, or that you would want to really put out there to those listening?
This is going to sound so cliche, but don't lose hope. A positive mindset, especially with Lyme and mold, is so important, um, because those things really affect your limbic system, and that's very real. So have your pity party. Don't deny yourself having those feelings. Have a big cry fest, but then don't ever lose hope, and try to find gratitude in every day in the things that you do have. That's really important. And I know that, again, I know that sounds cliche, but it's important. And be careful with your resources. Think before you spend. um, Nobody cares about you and your health like you do. So
Yeah.
take your time to do your own research, and be careful where you're putting your dollars, but don't lose hope. There's I never thought I'd be here today doing what I'm doing. And that's very real. And I did, by the way, and I'm still in this house, and I didn't have a ton of money. I didn't leave everything behind because I couldn't. And I was told I would never heal, and I did. So don't ever let anybody limit your belief with their own. So
That's
yeah.
great. Thank you so much for joining me today on Discover Health Podcast. And if there's people that want to reach out or learn more about you and what you do, or if there's people out there that want to learn more about Respirare and the tests that they offer, how could they get in touch with you, or how could they do that?
Well, first of all, anybody can access Respirare Labs technology, even if you're in a really remote area or not working with an IEP yet. We just launched a do-it-yourself option, which is so exciting because I work with a lot of people that don't have access to that. So you can go to respirarelabs.com. And me, I'm not running my consulting business right now. I'm really excited about the work I'm doing with Respirare Labs, but you can find me and my story and all my interviews at alignmoldconsulting.com.
Great. And I'll put those things down below this video, and I'll also put those in the description of the podcast. So thanks again for joining me today.
I appreciate the opportunity, Joshua. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the Discover Health podcast. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next week.